Hi there and welcome. This is Jenny from the Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana. We're on block 6 of our online quilt along, and the pattern is from Thimble Creek Quilts, and it's called Santa's Village. It's this cute little pattern right here. The quilt is behind me and block 6 is right here. So we're going to talk about fabrics and what the units are for this block. This month's block is composed of two different units, a half square triangle in the corner and a square and a square. There's 5 square and a square units that go across the center of the block. The finished size of the block is 12 inches. Unfinished size of the entire block is 12.5, and each of these units will finish at 4 inches. So this half square triangle is 4 inches finished, 4.5 unfinished, and the square and a square block the same, 4 inches finished and 4.5 unfinished. Our fabric choices this month are red, green, and cream. In the sample behind me, the red is in those 4 square and a square blocks, and the green is our half square triangle and our center block. We're going to change things up today, and we're going to make these red, and the center block we're going to introduce a fun small motif print so that you can add a little fun and variety in the center. And then these 4 square and a square blocks will be green. So let's get started. What we're going to be using today to make our block is a 7.5-inch square ruler, a nice sharp rotary cutter, a cutting mat, a pressing mat. Some other gadgets are some thread snips, a friction pen or a fabric pen, a Aurifil thread spool for your bobbin and your top. Your rulers that are specialty for this are a block lock half square triangle unit, and you want a 4.5 or larger. And then I'm going to show you another technique with square and a square, and we're going to be using the flying geese ruler. And really you can use any size ruler to do this technique, but I'm going to show you that here shortly. We also have our starch, which is Best Press and Terrio Magic mixed together to make Magic Press. It's a third amount of that, 2/3 of that, a nice hot iron, some fabrics which we already talked about, and today I'm sewing on a beautiful Bernina 790 with a dual feed foot number 37. So get all your gadgets together and let's sew. Let's start with the half square triangle units. You can do the traditional method, which is in the pattern for block 6, Santa's Village. You're going to cut 2 of the background fabric and 2 of your dark fabric. For today, we're going to do a red fabric. And in the directions, it says to cut 2 4 7/8 of each. We're going to do it a little bit differently, and we're going to cut them a little bit larger, and we're going to trim them down using the block lock 4.5-inch half square triangle unit. I have pre-starched my fabrics. I have 2 cream fabrics, and then I also have 2 red fabrics lying and stacked all together. I'm going to layer them, and I'm going to cut a 5.25-inch square out of all of those. We're ready to layer our fabrics. We have 2 reds and 2 creams. So you want to lay these fabrics right sides together so that the right sides are touching. And you will do that 2 times so that you have 2 sandwiches. And there you're going to mark a diagonal line from point to point so that it intersects each point. I'm using the 45-degree mark on my Creative Grids ruler to double check and make sure I'm doing a 45-inch line. After those are both marked, we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch on each side of that line. You're now going to cut your units apart so that you have 2. Remember, you have another one marked, so this will yield a total of 4 half square triangle units. You're going to press this towards the dark fabric in that direction. So I'm going to go to my woolly pressing mat, open it up, and then gently press to set that seam. Now that I've got my block pressed, I'm going to lay it down, and my seam is pressed towards the dark. I'm going to turn the seam so it is facing me, and when I lay the ruler into position, it will be laid properly so that that seam is right in that diagonal line. If you set it in incorrectly, it will be offset by 1/4 inch, and you don't want that. So seam facing you, be able to read the ruler, And this ruler is a straight 4.5 inch, so all I have to do is trim all the way around it. We are ready for the square in a square unit. You're going to make 5 of these units. If you follow the directions, you'll cut a center square at 3 3/8, and then you will add triangles to each side, opposite sides. Those are cut 2 7/8 and then cut on the diagonal. So you add a triangle here and here, press it, and then a triangle here and here, and press it, and you should have a unit that looks like that. If those units are a little off or your sewing isn't perfect, sometimes these edges won't be quite as straight. So I'm going to show you another technique for making square in a square blocks, and it's using the Flying Geese block lock ruler, and I'm just using it as a square up ruler in the end. The trick is the triangles on the side need to be cut a little bit larger. Your center square will not change in measurement, so you will still be cutting an accurate 3 3/8 inch square. I would recommend starching that fabric really heavily so that it behaves very efficiently and it doesn't shift or move on you. So those squares in the center will be 3 3/8. The triangles on the side I got from a chart from BlockLock. You can download it from blocklock.com. If you purchase a Flying Geese ruler, this chart is on the back. If you're looking at the chart, what you would look at is the measurements on the chart. So if I'm looking down, it says the finished size of the square in a square, and I scroll down to my finished size for my block, which is 4 inches. If I go across, it's going to tell me to cut my center square, 3 3/8, and then my corner triangles are going to be cut 2 per square in a square block, 2 of them, and the measurement is 3 1/4. So let's do that next. Let's start cutting for our square in a square block. This is going to be the 4 green square in a squares, and I'm going to starch it heavily, which I've already done, and then I'm going to fold it just so I can cut 4 at a time. You can certainly cut 1 at a time, but I folded it and it's ready to cut. And these squares are going to be cut 3 3/8. So I'm going to cut it a little bit larger to start through all the layers. Then I'll shift that piece and find the 3 3/8 inch measurement on my ruler. So I'm counting the 1/8 inch marks, measure twice, cut once. I'm going to cut my background triangles for my square in a square units, which are these white triangles. For each square in a square unit, I need 2 3 1/4. So 1 is here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. That means I need 10 3 1/4 inch squares. So I have a strip of fabric here. It's a little bit longer, but in order to make sure I can fit all those cuts, I'm just going to do a little bit of pre-measuring. So I've got a double selvage here. There's a fold. There's the full strip. I folded it up right about to the selvage edge. And then I'm going to measure over and make sure I can fit a cut out of that. So that would be 4. Measure over to 3 1/4. That would be 8. And look how close I am right here. There I am at 3 1/4. So that would be another 4. So I'd have 12 out of that if I'm efficiently cutting. If you're uncomfortable cutting that many layers at a time, open up the strip and cut 2 at a time and work your way towards the fold, because sometimes you can open the fold and get a square out of that. We have 12 3 1/4 inch squares. Now you're going to cut those on the diagonal from point to point. Now remember, I have a layer of 4, so if you're not comfortable cutting through 4, then take off a stack or whatever you're comfortable cutting through. Make sure they're still accurately laid upon each other and the edges are all even. And then you're going to take your 45-degree line, line it up along one edge, and then it should intersect each point if you've cut an accurate 3 1/4 inch square. So you're going to do that until you have a stack of those that yields 20. We're ready to sew our square in a square block. You want to lay them right sides together, and you're going to do opposite sides. And when you lay these on, you want this center point to go down the center of the square. So if you don't have that center marked, you can finger press it and get a small crease so that when you line up that square, the point will intersect that center point. You'll sew this side, and then you'll sew the opposite side, and you'll press it. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to press our block. On this instance, I am actually going to press towards the outside fabric, which on this one is my background. Most of the time you press towards the dark, but for this technique we need to lock it into a block lock ruler, and this will help with that. So I'm going to press that, and then my next step is to sew the other two sides. So those will lay with that center point. You want even distance on each side. You'll sew 1/4 inch on this side and 1/4 inch on this side. Now you'll press that seam out and then the opposite seam out. And you should have a square and a square block. We are going to trim it down next using the block lock ruler. Now you can see when you sew these edges, sometimes they can get a little wavy. So this is why this technique can be a little more accurate, but your center seam really needs to be accurately cut and sewn with 1/4 inch. Then when you lock these in, this will lock. You'll get your 1/4 inch reveal, and you'll work your way around the block so that you have your 1/4 inch reveal. When you're all done, you will have a 4.5 inch unfinished square and a square block. So that's one way that you can make a square and a square. We've made part of our units for our block. We've made the half square triangle units that go in the corner and the 4 square and a square blocks that go around the edge. Now let's work on our center block. If you're participating in class, you'll have a red square that you can cut out your block out of that will go in the center. You could also embroider a cute little holiday motif onto the fabric and cut that out. What I do want you to be aware of is when you're cutting those out, when a holiday motif is going to come out of the fabric, here is my selvage edge, and if I want that to be straight up and down, this is how it would look in the fabric. I need to cut it so that it is on point. So that means I'm going to be cutting around the bias edges. So prior to cutting it, starch it pretty heavily with magic press so that you have nice stable edges, and then cut it out. The other gadget that's helpful for this is using a product called glow line tape. So we know we need to measure a 3 3/8 inch square. So I marked that with this glow line tape. It's a vinyl adhesive tape. It comes off very easily and you can put it on any ruler. And then we also marked the center point for our block, so we could audition different fabrics. I would suggest getting a piece of fabric that is bigger than your square, because this diagonal measurement is actually closer to 5 inches, not 3 3/8. So we've got a couple fat quarters you can look at. This cute little snowman, and there he is in the center. How about a gnome? Or a holiday dog with a scarf. So this is a fun time to audition different fabrics for your center block. I've got a piece of holiday fabric here that I'm going to cut a motif out of. I've chosen this ornament right here. So I'm going to take my ruler and line it up to try to audition where I'd like that cut. Again, I have my center point. The nice thing about this motif is I have a line that I can line up my 45-degree angle, and I can cut my first cut. So I'm going to cut here and here. Then I'm going to rotate my fabric and cut the other side. Now I need to measure up to 3 3/8, which is where my line is. And I have a cute little holiday motif that can go in the center of my block. Again, I will sew it the same way, 2 sides, press, the other 2 sides, and press, and then square up using your block lock flying geese ruler. Good luck! Thanks for joining me today. You just finished block 6 from Santa's Village. We made half square triangles and square and a square blocks. We also focused on a cute little motif fabric. So happy sewing. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. We have lots of videos that we post. We'll also post one on how to make this block with AccuQuilt. Happy sewing, good luck. This is Jenny from the Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana. Bye-bye now.